So welcome to our live streaming webinar, Platforms, Tech, and the Systems. We should be here for about an hour. I know from experience that Polly and Meryl have a wealth of knowledge. So know that they will be here for all of your questions. They will be here to walk you through it. And all of this information is being currently recorded. It is being live streamed onto Facebook if you need it currently. And it will also be sent up in a follow-up email and resource as well. So as is our practice with our lifelong learning webinars, we're going to start with a moment of scripture and then a moment of prayer. So I'll start off with a moment of scripture. So as we settle in to this Zoom webinar, go ahead and settle your bodies, maybe close your eyes as we start with a word from the gospel. He said many things to them in parables. A farmer went out to scatter seed. As he was scattering seed, some fell on the path and birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where the soil was shallow. They sprouted immediately because the soil wasn't deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched the plants and they dried up because they had no roots. Other seed fell among thorny plants. The thorny plants grew and choked them. Other seed fell on good soil and bore fruit. In one case, a yield of 100 to 1. In another case, a yield of 60 to 1. In another case, a yield of 30 to 1. Everyone who has ears should pay attention. Polly, can you pray for us, please?
My pleasure. Thank you. God be with you.
And also with you.
Lord Jesus Christ, we come before you as a people of God, seeking to join your transforming work in the world. Open our eyes to see the movement of your Spirit. Open our minds to imagine new possibilities. Open our ears to hear the voices of all your children. Open our mouths to speak with honesty and love. Open our hands to share all that we have, and open our hearts to receive all that we need. Thank you, Lord, for calling us as your disciples and friends. Give us courage to follow where you lead. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, welcome to this Lifelong Learning at Virginia Theological Seminary webinar. Lifelong Learning is dedicated to equipping leaders in all aspects of their ministry, including with the eFormation Learning community, which is a digital media for ministry focused community where we are concerned with how we can best connect with our flock using all of these different tools that have appeared before us over the past decade or so. My name is Sarah Stonecipher Boylan. I'm the digital missioner with Lifelong Learning and also the convener of the eFormation Learning community. And I have the great privilege of gathering these two amazing people as presenters. I have spent a lot of time with Polly and Meryl this past summer. Maybe they didn't realize that what was going to happen when they answered my Facebook message and email, but that's what has happened. So I'll go ahead and let Polly and Meryl introduce themselves, and then we'll talk about sort of where we're headed today. And just to let you know, we have over 200 people gathered here. And so I'm grateful. 200 people on Zoom. And then it looks like we have, I think we have probably about 15 on Facebook. So we're doing great. And know that all of these resources will be made available to everyone who registered, and then also through social media as well. So if you miss something, it will be okay. There will be plenty of documentation available to you afterwards. All right, so Polly and Meryl, you go ahead and introduce yourselves with the most important pieces about your ministry.
All right. Well, I'm Meryl Watley. I have a company called Membership Vision. We write software for churches, web and podcasting platform for churches, and do a lot of work consulting on live streaming, getting people set up with the hardware, and just the weekly effort that it takes to get people to do that.
I'm Polly Reese. I'm a recent graduate of Berklee Divinity School at Yale and the Institute of Sacred Music. I'm a freelance consultant, and I do technical live streaming support plus the design of live church services, shows, and audio editing for any number of companies. My two biggest clients are one, a training school that I started here in Philly called Off Mic Comedy School, and then I work with Lin-Manuel Miranda's company, Freestyle Love Supreme.
That's not too shabby, I have to say. All right. So as I said before, all of the wisdom from these two amazing people will be provided in lots of documentation. And as a super extra follow-up, I'm excited to host these two people again for office hours tomorrow. Again, Polly and Meryl had no idea how much of my face they would be seeing on Zoom. So we are hosting them for digital office hours tomorrow. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the link into the chat box so then that way y'all can see it and register. And so these will be more hands-on questions. We'll be able to see your face. We'll be able to respond to your questions and understand your context a little bit better. So this is sort of the tasting event for a deeper dive tomorrow. So again, link is in the chat, and I'll also drop it on Facebook as well. So with that, this is sort of where we're headed today. After this, I'm handing it over into Polly and Meryl's very capable hands. Oops, sorry, I forget that my mouse is very sensitive with Google Slides. So there we go. I'm gonna not jump around as much. So we're gonna talk about the philosophy behind live streaming, pause for some questions. Polly and Meryl will have some amazing suggestions for hardware along with sassy commentary, as I like to say, and then ending in questions as well. All right, I'm going to hand it over to you two.
All right. Okay, so the first thing that we just want to address, I know everyone's here with the thought that they either are streaming or they do want to stream or they want to do it better. And so it may seem an odd question to say, should we be streaming? But that is a question that is worth asking. Does it make sense for you to stream in your environment? And there are a few things to look at, and we're going to run through a list here that's not a complete list, but it's some of the things that I think are worth thinking about. Let's take a look. So we're looking at different reasons to live stream, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons, or we're going to question some of those reasons. And there's a good chance that after you go through this list, you'll still be saying, yes, we want to, or yes, we need to. Now, we want to make clear that we're not saying don't do anything online. We're just saying, does it need to be live? And does it need to be happening at the time that your service is happening if you are doing a service in your church? So one of the first reasons would be just expectations. Right now, with everything being disrupted, a lot of parishioners are feeling comfort when they see their services from inside the church live. And at least we think they are. So the first thing might be to ask them, if this is what they want. But there are a lot of other ways that you might be able to meet those expectations. A lot of churches tried to go live at first when this pandemic started. And over time, they kind of backed off from that. And instead of being live, decided, let's pre-record, let's put it on different platforms like Facebook Live as a premiere, Facebook premiere, and also on YouTube maybe, as a way to have it still be an event that's online that happens at once that a lot of people can gather around. And additionally, we can be there. For instance, the priest and others can actually be on Facebook and therefore be available to interact with people during the service. So some people have found other ways to address that sense of normalcy and a sense of community and gathering. And I call this two birds. I don't like the rest of that sentence, so we're just going to stop with two birds. The fact that we are in person and we're already doing this work, going live is just the natural next step. And there's this other thing, which is we don't have the emotional personal bandwidth to do this twice. We can't do it live and then, you know, also do it later online or anything like that. This could work, and if you have all of the right ingredients, it may. It's really, it is about your personal bandwidth. It's also about your actual technical bandwidth. You know, can you do this? Can your church's internet handle, you know, an upload stream? And if it can't, that doesn't mean that can't be addressed. There are a lot of technical things that Polly and I will both be talking about later, such as you want to be hardwired if you can be. If you have to rely on Wi-Fi, you want to make sure it's rock solid. And a few other notes when it comes to technical questions. If you cannot do those things, but you can record the live service and broadcast it later, is that the best way to deliver what you are trying to deliver to the people who are not in church? I like to think of this as the same way that a lot of churches will have a service that's more geared towards families and children, and then another service that is, you know, geared towards the general population, or maybe a right one and a right two. Well, you might have something that's different that you want to do for people who are at home or who are not in the building with you. So think those things through. Okay, my personal experience is a lot of times everything can be stacked against going live. You could be in a rural church that no one has internet that's any better than, you know, DSL from 2003 and so on and so forth, but the rector insists that you're going live. You'll notice in the counterpoints, I say reality. Well, the rector is part of reality too. So if you are having to go live, you know, due to this, then there are again ways to address the issues that you may need to overcome, and a lot of it is through simplicity. You know, through 4G LTE connection, as opposed to trying to use your you know, church's internet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Polly especially, and a little bit later, is going to be talking a lot about some technological, you know, some things that can help you do that even in difficult situations.
I'll raise Merrill here as well with this one. I have a couple of clients where it's the opposite sort of arrangement. Rather than the rector insisting, it's the vestry or perhaps the rector's warden that's insisting. Like in either circumstance, like it's difficult because my experience has been with most of the clients I've seen is that trying to figure out, even more importantly than the fact that there is like a strong insistence from a person of authority is why, like, what's the reason behind that? So.
And then finally, and this is one that Polly brought up and may want to say more about, homebound and immunocompromised population. There are people who cannot make it to the service, and or you know, there may be people who choose not to come to the service for reasons beyond these. And from a fairness perspective, if the people who do get to have that routine because they can come, and then there are those who just are left out because they don't. So there is kind of a fairness, you know, thing to think about here. Even if you are doing potentially another service for people who are at home that is more geared towards, that's not necessarily just a broadcast of what's going on in the room, maybe you do the broadcast that's happening in the room as well. It's a, you know, something that I would put in the pro column for doing it. And then licensing is a yeah. Licensing, this is a really big issue. So as a church, and I wrote this whole thing out because I thought I want you to have this in a slide so that you can just show it to the person that you need to show it to. There are a few churches who've had some trouble over these past few months because they were not properly licensed, and then they figured out how to do that. A lot of churches were with a licensing agency that extended their normal performance license that every church should have to be doing, music in their space, to online for, through April the 15th or something like that when this thing started. So this is why a lot of churches end up choosing to only stream sermons online or only to podcast sermons or however they're doing it. So just make sure you have the proper licensing so that you won't have any copyright issues. That's really the main thing. And it doesn't matter if it's live or pre-recorded for this, for anything, you need to make sure you have the proper license. So we have a Q&A slide here about these whys. And Sarah, you're looking puzzled right now. Do you feel this is an appropriate place?
Oh no, this is totally great. Sorry, I did not mean to look puzzled. I think I was just like trying to take everything in. So I was just responding to Peter's question in the Q&A section that said, I noticed some people are doing Zoom worship. I'm nervous about that, but there are benefits and not doing benefits in doing Zoom worship, and wondering if there are best practices.
Sarah, I know we're the featured players here, but you're the Zoom expert, if I recall.
Yeah, so I find that I would say I'm going to expand it out to any just online worship and not just focusing around Zoom. But you can say Google Meets, you can say GoToMeeting, you can say Zoom. It's all the same. The reason why I really appreciate those types of worship experiences is because it is created for this sacred space, and you're not trying to do a weird choreography of both the nave space and the altar space, and then trying to bring in people both online and face to face. I find that it's easier just to focus on a new modality and to create something that is authentically your congregation than trying to then translate something that doesn't easily translate.
Do you mind if I take one of these over here? Amy Pringle. Proper licensing given Facebook's new policies. Everything I've read about that, Amy, is yes. The new policies are aimed more at the idea of musical experiences solely and performative musical experiences as opposed to worship. And another thing that's interesting about that is, even though they're kind of making statements about their policies, if you look at their policy, it would have been just as problematic before if you go back and look at what their streaming policies around music were. So my understanding is that if you have a proper license, like through, and since there's another question here about a resource for licensing. I know One License is the name that a lot of churches use, and there's another one called something like CCL, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, CCLI. So Benjamin Badgett, both you and Amy just happen to be next to each other, but I think that if you have that licensing, and then I might as well answer the next one, Rowan's, which is the bare minimum is that you put your license information, which is your license ID and the period for which your license is valid, on the announcement and on in the description of your video. Now, what you're really supposed to do is to take each piece that is covered by that license, and each musical piece, and this would be involving your music director or whomever normally would be doing this, and saying, this piece licensed by One License with this license ID. You're actually supposed to list it out. There are examples you can find online, and we can try to get something in writing, to be a little bit more specific with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are mentioning One License has good resources, CCLI has good resources. Sorry everyone. All of those hymns that are in the public domain are good. And then you also have the options that are that some people have created, like Church Publishing Group has given some licenses, some hymns that are free to use for streaming purposes, because this is, you know, a crazy time. So all of those, all of it is to say is you need to be aware that you need to have the correct streaming license, and you have to know what all of those pieces are attached to it. So I'll say it again: one license, CCLI, and there are some ongoing issues with the Facebook, and I think that I think it remains to be seen what will happen on Sunday.
Yeah. And the question about Zoom from St. Thomas's Church, do you need this licensing for that? Technically, yes. You know, any digital streaming online, the answer to that would be yes.
Awesome. All right, well, we're gonna flip on over to hardware, where Polly and Meryl will go ahead and give their top picks and their understanding about each of them.
Okay.
I love that.
So now I put in here a PTZ Optics 30 times zoom NDI PoE cameras. That's a bunch of letters and numbers, and it also has a brand. And I'm going to say that PTZ Optics is a fantastic brand, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. The more important terms are the PTZ, which stands for Pan Tilt Zoom, PoE, which stands for Power over Ethernet, and I'll explain why that's important in a moment. And then NDI, which is that this is run over a network device interface, which is included in the hardware of this camera. So why do I recommend this? Now, there's a big range of different things that you can do. This camera here is a $2,000 camera. There is a company called Minray, MINRRAY, which my understanding is the manufacturer that's actually behind this camera. But Minray has a 20 times zoom camera, which is plenty, that sells for about $1,100. So know that the budget doesn't have to be really, really big, and you can do one camera, you can do multiple cameras. The PTZ, that just means that the camera, you can pan with it, you can tilt up and down, and you can zoom. Power over Ethernet means that you can run a regular Cat6 Ethernet cable to this camera, as long as you have the right equipment on the other end, and we'll talk about that in a second, and you won't need to run a power cord to it. So if you can get cabling, just this one cable to the camera, you can not only power it, you can also control it over the network device interface. And by controlling it, I'm talking about the pan, tilt, and zoom. And there's a software interface for when you're streaming from a computer. And that software and the different pieces of software that we'll talk about in a moment have controllers for pan, tilt, zoom. So you will be able to control those cameras and even create presets for them. So you can say, when the sermon starts, I want to switch to this camera and I want it to zoom in this much and turn here. And you can save that setting on the camera so that when you're doing it on Sundays, you just hit that preset and everything, it switches to that camera and zooms where you want it. So these cameras are really flexible. They not only can be mounted in your church, they also have a tripod mount so that you can if you have a system that starts with everything that I'm about to show you here, you will be able to build off of it in really interesting ways. So, but it all begins with a PTZ NDI PoE camera. And again, remember Minray as a much cheaper alternative that I have had really good luck with. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so how do we get power to that camera? Well, there's something called a switch, and I want to distinguish between a switch and a router. What a switch does is it takes an incoming signal from a router, an incoming cable, and it shares it with multiple devices without itself being part of what's assigning IP addresses and so forth. The reason that's important is that if you want this to run on a network that you can expand, and you're running it off of a subnet on your router in your church building, and maybe you want to be able to expand into another part of the building, not just in the chapel, and you want to be able to put cameras somewhere else, you can actually do that if you're running this, if you're allowing the main router that's coming from your internet connection to be what is assigning the IP addresses throughout the system. So you want to switch. Now, a power over Ethernet switch just means that every time you plug an Ethernet cable into this, if the device on the other end can take power over Ethernet, this will deliver it. And that's why you will not have to have a power cord going wherever you're putting these cameras. So we're trying to set you up for, in this sort of design that I'm talking about here, for simplicity of delivery of power and so forth to these places, and flexibility, being able to add more cameras, being able to have cameras that you occasionally use, potentially outdoors or other places that you can have on a tripod, and not having to worry about getting power wired to those places and so forth. Now, this system that I'm talking about would assume also that you have a sound mixer in your church that your sound is running through. So you have microphones and so forth. This will take a signal off of your soundboard in through like a normal microphone type input, and convert it to USB so that it can be joined with the video on your computer. So sound is super, super, super important. A lot of times this is something that people don't pay enough attention to when they're putting a video piece together or when they're broadcasting. You can have a beautiful looking video, and if people can't hear it and can't understand it, then it's just as bad as when your sound is bad in the church. So keep that in mind. This helps you get great sound.
And I'm gonna translate that for all of you non-techie people. I'm just gonna do some customer service here, Meryl.
Go for it.
I'm gonna do the translation. So this will take your sound system within the church, and then that little red thing, that scarlet, is a literal translator. It's sort of like the dongles for your computer. So it's so that you can take your big sound system that, with your Bluetooth or with your lapel mics, and then it will feed directly into your broadcast.
Okay, so some notes really quickly. When we talk about streaming software, I'm going to leave StreamYard alone because Polly's going to talk about that, and he loves it, and I like getting excited. But I do want to mention some other options and the differences between them. So you could have a computer, and this could be a Mac or a PC, with the exception of vMix, which can only be on a PC. And you can have software that lives there that you pay for once, and you can stream out to multiple places. Like you can stream to Facebook and you can stream to YouTube, and you don't have to be paying ongoing licensing fees as you would through Vimeo live stream services and stuff like that, or StreamYard, which is much less expensive. There's also a solution called OBS. OBS, and Polly will be speaking more at length about that, but just a quick overview is that OBS is sort of I like to think of it as, like I have a Linux computer down here that you have to kind of know a lot about computers in order to run. And I've also got my Mac that I can just kind of turn on and do things. OBS, you have to know an awful lot about it. And there's a bit more of a learning curve. There's a great community out there that can help you with it. Sometimes things don't quite go right with what you expect, and there are inexplicable issues, but that's true. That could be true with paid software as well. But these sorts of options have some interesting possibilities with them. For instance, with Wirecast or vMix, there's a certain licensing fee level that you can pay for. And when you do, you get the PTZ controls built into the software. The Vimeo live stream software also has PTZ controls built into it. And that means that you don't have to buy an extra piece of hardware, that thing that might have a joystick and buttons on it to switch between the different cameras. And whenever I think of an extra piece of hardware, in addition to the expense that it brings, even though it's usually pretty cool how it works, it is another thing that can break. It's another piece in the chain that can go down. Vimeo Livestream Studio has some additional interesting features. Not that the others don't have the potential for doing the same thing, but Livestream Studio makes it extremely easy to bring in people from different locations. So let's say that, you know, we go from being able to have everyone come in to do the readings and stuff, but some people who are your lectors or so forth may want to do it from home, may not be comfortable coming in. You can actually have them at their computer through their webcam, bring them into your live stream. All of these pieces of software also do make it easy to include pre-recorded pieces. So I just want to kind of give the broad view like that. Polly will be going in a little bit deeper on the features of StreamYard, which apply in many ways to some of these others as well. When it comes to computer, Polly's going to tell you don't skimp on this. He's going to say something like, this is the one thing you need to spend money on if nothing else, and I completely agree. You need to have something that can pull this off. And this is me being ready to go to the next. There we go. And then also this idea of flexibility and portability. Okay, so if you can network different areas of your church building, you can actually add some of those pieces of hardware that I showed before, the PoE and additional cameras, the PoE switch and additional cameras in other rooms in the building. You can have cameras that you reserve to be taken outside if you're doing an outdoor service. When you're doing these things, the one thing to keep in mind is to plan for sound portability as well. And what I like to do is, let's say that you have sort of a mixing room that's right off of your church, and hopefully it has a door that has easy access out to your parking lot if you do parking lot services or something right now with everything that's going on. And let's say you already have an outdoor PA system that you use for that. Well, everything that we're talking about in the church can be translated outside. And if you're doing a lot of thinking ahead when it comes to this stuff, when you're building for what's inside the church, you can say, oh, well, here's something that we've put together that will allow us to expand in this way. And what we need to do now is get, like a large, kind of one of those speed bump looking things that you can run cables under, that we could put into the parking lot and run the cabling that we need to get the sound back in here. And then we just can run Cat6, over through there and run it to the cameras. And now we can do the very same thing that we're doing inside, outside. So, you want to try to plan for that kind of portability and flexibility. And then finally, I want to talk about the opportunity that all of this presents. A lot of schools, I'm going to talk about like elementary and middle and high schools, I guess middle and high schools, don't have what they used to have when it comes to theater tech type stuff that people can do. And this is a great opportunity to have a youth ministry around doing this broadcast, around doing recordings. It gives them an opportunity to learn something that's really practical. It's something that, people like to have stuff in their college submission forms and so forth, their kind of resume for college. I can't think of the right word for it at the moment. That shows some of these things that they've done and these skills that they've picked up. And it actually means a lot, like for someone like me who is trying to help a church find somebody who can come in and do this professionally. So it's something that can be very, very helpful for people, for kids who are out there, and it can actually draw people in. It can be something that is a light for people to come towards.
All right. Now we're so I would have to say Meryl's suggestions are definitely addressing a need of where many parishes have been using iPhones, iPads, and various things. So Meryl's is definitely, if you have some dedicated money set aside and want to make it not only just for this moment in time, but to really be a part of your ongoing ministry. Yeah, Meryl, go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to mention is what this budget would look like. I kind of failed to mention that. So if you, when there'll be links at the end of this slideshow, and you'll have it in the PDF of this slideshow that go to the, to Amazon. I'm sorry, I couldn't find better links for everybody, but to Amazon for these products so that you can see how much they cost and so forth. But like I said, that camera is a $2,000 camera. I recently did a 4-camera install for a church. So, and they were the $1,100 camera version that I mentioned before, the Min-Ray cameras. So we did 4 cameras. They needed a new computer for this. They needed the switch, the PoE switch, and they needed the Focusrite Scarlett input, audio input, and they needed the cabling done. And we did all of that for around $9,000. So that's a 4-camera setup. Now, if you take 2 cameras away from that, and less expense on the cabling and so forth, and I don't mean just the cable, but I mean having people come in and do it, you can knock that down quite a bit. So just know that this is, again, the idea is if you started with 1 camera and you already had a computer and you wanted to upgrade all that stuff later and you got the switch and the audio piece, you could be looking at doing this for, definitely under $2,000 completely to do a 1-camera setup, and then you can build on it later.
All right, kicking it off to Polly.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for Meryl. So in my section, I'll give you right off the top what my driving principles with tech with the clients that I work with are. One, functionality. You can see exactly why. That simplicity. In particular, I want to highlight the fact that like the all-in-one products are only good if they actually do the things that you need them to do, and they're all-in-one. Like the software is easy enough and the hardware is easy enough for you to learn and learn well, because chances are you may not be the only person who has to use your system. And then portability. In my work, the entire setup that you're going to see that I have is 100% portable. And as the city of Philadelphia starts to move towards a more relaxed sort of like green phase of public gatherings, with some of my some of my contractors, I expect to be doing some live events. Yeah, so that's those are my driving principles. Next slide, please. So let's talk about mics. The Yeti Blue mic is the mic that you see I'm using right now. I was just talking with another client about it earlier this morning. For all of the exact reasons right there, there's going to be a link in the last couple of slides where, at least as of time of writing, which was earlier this morning, they are currently in stock. A lapel mic, like what you're used to using there, perhaps in your parish already. That they make some now that will even just plug directly into your computer. You don't even need another adapter. It just has like the little pin at the end. I think it looks a little bit like this. If I have one over here somewhere. Yep, the little pin that looks exactly like that. It just has that in the end of it, and you just plug it directly into your headphone jack. You can find those on Amazon. The Focusrite Scarlett, I'll second Meryl on this. These run in the range of, depending on how much capability you need, they can run somewhere between $100 to $200 and up from there. They're really easy to use. When you're doing portable sound, they replace like bigger equipment that translates microphones, translates instruments into digital audio. It's on my buy list currently, as I'm expecting to be going out and doing things with like live stand-up comedy, with like small sort of like singer-songwriter events. Yeah. Next slide, please. Cameras. Oh boy. This is where, as Meryl discussed, there's the potential to spend a lot of money. I'll go over some of the solutions that I like when I sort of like scrap things together that I like. You can use your phone. You absolutely can use your phone. chances are, like, if you have a phone that you've purchased like through, and Sarah's got a phone and an iPad right there, if you have a plan that's like on a lease agreement through your cell phone company, or you can even go and buy like the old iPhone SEs on eBay, the unlocked ones, and they still have like the 2017 iPhone SEs, they still have, like, even without like a plan, they still have a really good camera in it. And they have enough processing power to where they can like be part of a Zoom call, and so that can be like another camera angle for you. And also, like, if you're away and you need like a friend to cover for you, chances are your friend probably has a phone too. A tablet device, especially iPad, same reasons. Then the next two cameras are things that I would encourage you to consider buying depending on your budget. The Mevo Start is one of the things that we actually used when I've collaborated with the presiding bishop's office. The Mevo Start is a newer model of what we used, but they are this particular line of camera is an all-in-one device that, in my use of it, actually works for the things that you need it to do, because it's a camera. It's no larger than your actual phone, than your actual phone right here. It has its own battery supply. It has its own space for a micro SD card, so it can do all of its recording by itself. Doesn't have to be plugged into things. But if you do plug it into things like an external microphone or something else, it can just as easily stream directly to your phone or to your computer. And a lot of like the pre-processing in terms of making your video look good, all of that software is included. It is on the pricier side of the things that I will recommend, but because it is so user-friendly, and my experience has been that almost anyone could use it, because in my own first usage of it, I was given 5 minutes with it and the app, like right before like a session. I think it was like I want to say it was like a Forma thing, like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, for those of you who are a church conference 4 or 5 years ago. And I was able to figure out in about 10 minutes. And then the last thing, the GoPro Hero 3. Yes, I know that this is an action camera made for action filmmaking, but it actually does this work well. There are capture cards that are designed to be retrofitted to these, so that you can use a $40 camera and turn it into a live streaming video cam. So there are ways of sort of hacking this together. And of course, if you have a computer, you can always just use your computer's camera too. Next slide, please. StreamYard. I do really like this platform. It's a personal favorite of mine. It's a web-based program. You don't have to download any software for it, even if you are one of the producers who's sort of like helping to set it up. It's really cheap. If you're live streaming to Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or any other sort, like multiple like types of programs, or hosting clients, it will aggregate comments and chat from all of them and put them in one stream that you can see, which is like one of the best things in the world. And there are pros and cons to streaming to multiple platforms for a whole host of things. And if you want to talk about that, we can. Has all of the functionality of Zoom that's really helpful in terms of being able to move boxes around, being able to spotlight different things, being able to share your screen and video and audio. But it's been built by live streamers for people who are new to live streaming and don't want to have to go through the work of creating all of that custom stuff. Can you use Yolanda has an interesting question about a DSLR camera with an HDMI capture card. We'll get to questions like those as well, but happy to answer. And the answer is most of the time yes, but not always. This is also really cheap. A basic licensed monthly subscription is $25. It's even cheaper if you pay the $240 for the year up front. And it's very easy to customize. The show that you see me appearing in over here, I'm on the right side of the screen on my camera, was designed by my buddy there. Her name is Shoshana. She covers like Broadway news and things. And it took her maybe about 15 minutes to set up that platform. Plus, if you have overlays at the bottom to give names, or if you want to show scripture or any sorts of things, like a scrolling ticker if you want to have tithing, donation information, or other sorts of important information that people need to have access to. This is very easy to customize, and I think you can probably set up a custom platform, setting aside the time for any custom graphic design that you want in the course of maybe 1 to 2 hours, and then be ready to stream. Next slide, please. OBS, honorable mention, as Meryl had mentioned before, legitimately free and endlessly customizable, but there is a big learning curve to it. If you like putting things together and figuring out how they sort of work, or taking things apart, like in particular, if you're a jigsaw puzzler, that sort of mentality and the patience, this is particularly useful. I just used it last night for a show where I was doing a sort of like daily show stroke John Oliver sketch segment, like fake news segment. I'm actually using it right now to be able to broadcast the background that you're seeing, while also being able to switch into other things seamlessly like this, and then crossfade back. So the point is to be able to, whatever is easy and whatever is easy for you and you have the emotional bandwidth to learn is what you should go with. This requires a lot more time and emotional bandwidth to learn, but you can make it look like almost anything. Next slide, please. Computers. This is the one point where if you're gonna spend money, this is where you should. Maybe not printers specifically, but there's really not much to say besides, if you're going to live stream, this is kind of a sort of like bottleneck point where you have to have a computer that has enough processing speed to run whatever hosting client is, like the YouTube, Facebook, to run that website, then to run whatever software is gathering people together, like Zoom or any of these other web conferencing things that you're using, plus then to process in all of the audio and the video. So this is the one place where, if you are going to spend money or try and find a grant to cover like the costs of starting this work, this is where I would target that money for. Because if you have a strong computer that you can grow with for a couple of years, then you'll have some room to grow and experiment and to learn. But without the computer, it's really, you're very limited at what you can do. Next slide, please. So on the left side column, these are the exact requirements that I think you need at an absolute minimum, and it's at least reasonably possible that your computer may have some of these already. The CPU, the memory, the disk space, the monitors, but then on the right hand side, there you see exactly what I think that you need in order to be able to do this work well. The reason for that is the processor. The processor is what allows your computer to work at a fast enough speed. The memory is what allows your computer to do a bunch of different things at the same time. The disk space is what allows you to be able to process in like all of the videos, process in all of the audio that you might have stored that you need to send out. And then the monitors, the reason why this is particularly important is because you need to be able to see a lot of different things at the same time. And frankly, trying to do all of that on a laptop monitor, switching between windows, is a lot more multitasking just in your brain, when chances are you're probably doing a lot of multitasking already. Next slide, please. So this is my setup from home. This is the setup that I'm broadcasting out to you from right now. You have my entire list of things there along the left-hand side of what everything is that you see. In particularly, I do a lot of music things. I just finished a virtual choir video for one of our local Episcopal schools here in Philly. So it is my specialty to talk about some of those things. Particularly, I use like Logic Pro and have like a little sort of mini keyboard down here in the corner that I use for some sort of like digital audio and live loop production with Freestyle Love Supreme Academy. And then I have my mascot, Sister Sledgehog, sitting down there, and my tea and biscuits, because you definitely you need those like creature comforts when you're spending long hours either editing audio or watching a stream. Like morale is legitimately important. Yeah, morale is legitimately important, has been my experience. And these monitors are maybe like, I think I spent like $70 to $90 each at Walmart. These you should not spend a lot of money on monitors. If you can find ways of like using old computer monitors as your screens, that's great. My experience being like walked through that with, at least with Apple's tech, is that it's a much more difficult than it is ever made to sound. That is the end of my slides and specific like tech components, and then we've got a couple of pages of links for all of the different products that we've talked about, and I'll pass it back to our fearless leader, Sarah.
Sarah,
yeah.
I've been seeing some of the things in the chat, and I wanted to mention a couple of quick items because we knew we had a compressed period of time in which we were going to be talking about a lot of stuff. And so I want to, number one, say plenty, we're going to be available obviously tomorrow for questions and so forth, but also reading through the document, the PDF that Sarah's going to send out, we'll have the video. But a lot of the questions had to do with, well, we literally don't have any budget. What can we do? And I want to say my experience with that is that you want to have as good quality as you can. And at the same time, don't ever underestimate the importance of just that connection of, if your rector has a laptop camera and they're speaking directly into it, and that's how they're broadcasting to Facebook. It feels very personal. It feels, it can offer such comfort to people. And I do think that a lot, this is a lot of what I was talking about specifically too, but in both of our cases is about people who are wanting to kind of grow and expand in it. But at the beginning of Polly's bit, there are a lot of pieces like lapel mics that they were describing that you can plug into an iPad and so on and so forth. That sort of stuff will keep your budget really, really low if you need to do something like that. And you can put some really good stuff together that's going to be extremely meaningful to the people in your congregation. So I don't want us to put all this focus, or for you to think that we're saying this for the gee whiz bang kind of aspect of it. It's really about communicating that and getting that across to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do have all of those links that Polly mentioned. All of those are going to head out to you. All of those tech-specific things, that Scarlett 2i2, pan-tilt zoom cameras that Meryl mentioned, all of it, the Mevo, all of that is going to come to you shortly. We'll also send out some information about the licensing changes that are happening on Facebook, which everyone is filled with anxiety about. I fully acknowledge that. I've heard varying different things about it, as I'm sure Polly and Meryl have as well. And so so all of that is to say, all of it is coming your way. Don't you worry. A lot of it, I believe, having listened to Meryl and Polly and various other places, and various other people and places, a lot of it has to do with your budget. A lot of it has to do with your tech setup, your tech abilities, and then again, not planning for this moment, but also planning for the farther out instances as well. And so I think that that's really important to think about. We did have one question about Meryl, I sent it to you about OBS. Does it work? OBS work with Android and iOS systems, so both Apple products and Android systems?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. That's good to know. And then I think we had a super specific question about the, I feel like Meryl actually knows this off the top of his head. What is the absolute bare minimal upload bandwidth one needs to stream to Facebook Live? I turn to you, Meryl, because I trust you.
It's less than you think. You can, that's why I do recommend even going over cellular if you don't have great internet at your church or whatever. But I would say your minimum upload speed, would be what, maybe 1.5, maybe 1 megabit a second. I mean, like minimum. What would you say, Polly? Would that be?
I mean, it's tricky because the more people that you have on your stream, the more bandwidth that you need, because and it also depends on your video card, like how much your graphics card in your computer can handle. We didn't talk about that. 1 or 2 realistically. I think like in that sort of range. I've heard of it being done. I'm usually, when I'm sharing bandwidth with like my other housemates, I'm usually running in the minimum of 3 to 4.
And I would say that if you want like a 720p, you want to have at least 10, I would say, to really have something that looks, sharp like that. For practical purposes, I think if you have 1 to 2, you're doing great. But I would also so I'm seeing someone saying they recommend 2.5 megabit for 720p. I agree with that, but there are a few other concerns about exactly what, how much that you're sending across on that, and how much color depth and all that sort of stuff. So there are a lot of different things that can affect it. The other part of that question. Oh, well, when you're testing your upload speeds, make sure that you're testing your upload speeds in the same way that you're going to be streaming. So, if you're testing your upload speeds from a wired connection and then you're streaming from a phone, then you're going to get different results. So just keep that in mind as well.
And I think we've had a few questions about why would you need extra software tech if you're just doing Facebook Live. And I think we mentioned it, but I want to make a point of saying it. That I think Meryl especially said, it's not just about streaming what's in the nave or what's happening in the service. It's about bringing pre-recorded videos in, or a choir video that somebody like Polly created, or having live readers stream in. So then that way you're knitting together, you're using all of those that crazy mixing board to bring people together to create an interwoven service of what's happening live at a second location, and then what might be pre-recorded. So that way it's a full expression of your community and not just what is happening in the church's 4 walls that has good Ethernet connection.
There's a quick question down here from Yolanda Clark. The streaming software allow you to stream to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. Do all of them? I don't know if all of the ones that we mentioned do. I know that, with the licensing with Wirecast or vMix, you can. With OBS, you have to take an extra step, I think. Is that right, Polly?
Yeah. So the nice thing with OBS is because it's open source software, meaning that like anybody who knows the programming language of OBS can create plugins. Is that so the package that you download by itself doesn't do it on its own, but you can download other plugins that have been created by external users to do that. It's not easy though. Like an easy one that's set up to do that would be StreamYard. There are others that are like StreamYard that are like on the higher end of like the pay scale, that will like customize like a stream for you that like will go to any number of hosting clients that you want. Particularly Hovercast is great. Like they're sort of like cream of the crop. Like the Democratic National Convention used them for like their stream this particular year, but they start at $1,000 a month, so you have to have like a real like reason to use it. Yeah. Zoom. Sorry, go ahead, Meryl.
One thing I wanted to jump in with is there's something that I accidentally skipped, and that's with the Vimeo / live stream platform. The cost it's a recurring cost, and there's different levels you can get, but I want to say roughly $700, $800 a year or something like that is one particular level that not only gets you, where you could do 3 live streams simultaneously. Let's say that you're a diocese or something like that, but you can also have a Roku channel or an Amazon Fire channel created, multiple ones, not just one, from your Vimeo account when you have those higher level licensing from them. So you could make it, especially for people now who TV really is a smart TV, you could have a channel or multiple channels on your TV. You could have your adult education channel, and you could have, and these things could be available for people in your congregation. You can also do video on demand, pay-per-view. And if there's any reason for you to be monetizing any of your content. So just other things to think about. If you're part of an organization that does conferences and so forth, there are a lot of good things about it as well.
And then just as a nice little ending note, and I'm going to say the word nice, but please know you can be more realistic. What's your sense of live streaming as being necessary in the future?
Oh boy, this is a big one.
Why does that depend on it?
Amy, I was just typing an answer to your question as Sarah was about to bring it up. For me, live streaming is a justice issue. Meryl alluded to this a little bit earlier that I felt this way, but I do. There are a couple of friends of mine that are severely immunocompromised, that have experience, that are looking for like a spiritual home, but have had experiences of have had like really, really negative experiences with church. Some even caught like at going to like the level of trauma, to where like we see some of those sorts of signs of trauma. And I think for those people who are immunocompromised, for people who cannot necessarily don't necessarily have the capability to come to church for any reason, in my particular opinion, I don't know that it's necessarily our call to say like what reasons are valid to why people can't or don't want to come to church. It's our responsibility to decide what our spiritual responsibility is to those people where they are. That's both evangelism and discipleship, I think, in a way, and pastoral care. So I think that like a basic level of live streaming, now that churches have had to demonstrate that it is possible and adjust some of their liturgical theology in order to make space for it, I think that it's important to at least have it be available. Maybe not necessarily in the same capacity that we've seen it here as we've been in lockdown, and realistically continue to be in lockdown, especially when it comes to choral music for the foreseeable future. And I know that there was a very detailed ask for music tech. That's a question that I'm happy to answer at a later time. Send me an email or come to the office hours tomorrow, and I'm happy to walk through like all of the details about that. But I do think that it's important, and I don't. It may go away. The notion of live streaming may go away, but I'm not sure that it should.
And I simply I agree 100% with all of that. And the only thing I would add is that I think that, again, like you have your 9 a.m. crowd and you have your 11 a.m. crowd, this is an opportunity for growth. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity for growth. Not just, for the population of the church or anything like that, but for the way we think about these relationships and the way that we think about what it means to have friendships and relationships that are online. We know we're going to be dealing with this specifically for a little while longer. And after that, you know, a lot of people are going to be asking themselves, you know, why don't I do it this way? This works for me. So I'd be prepared for it.
All right. Thank you all both so much. And if this hour plus was not enough time with Sarah, Polly, and Meryl, you can join us tomorrow for open office hours. So that is a very different format than this, where we will be, it's a Zoom meeting setting, it's face-to-face, and we can address more of your context, more of your concerns, more of your needs. And you can go ahead and register. I'm dropping it in the chat box right now. And it's also available in the Facebook description as well too. And you can join us again tomorrow as a follow-up opportunity for conversation. And so that is 12 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. More opportunities from Lifelong Learning includes a webinar on October 1st. It's sponsored by our Baptized for Life initiative, and then also a preaching conference. And we also have 3 different Sacred Ground opportunities, and you can find all of that available on virginiaseminary.eventbrite.com. That link is coming at you in the chat box. And they're also available on
There
Facebook.
it goes. Yeah.
I know, I'm trying. I have my links ready to go this time. I say all of my good stage management background. All right, and again, a huge thank you to Polly and Meryl for joining us with your expertise, with your graciousness, with all of your amazing answers to all of these questions. I'm excited to see and to hear what's next for both of you, and I look forward to witnessing it, probably from a distance and probably on live stream. So again, all of these slides and everything will be in your inbox as soon as I get my iMovie up and start cutting. So it'll be available to you pretty quickly. So again, huge thank you to Meryl and Polly, and to the 200 plus people that were here with us both on Zoom and on Facebook. So I'm greatly appreciative of all of your ministries. So thank you.